Hello and welcome to the latest in our Talk and Adoption series. Today we are looking at adopter choice. I am Grace Gomez and I am the Adopter Diversity Recruitment Officer and I work for Pact charity and I'm based in the Reading office. And today I'm joined by one of our doctors, Lesley. Thanks for joining us, Lesley.
No problem, my pleasure.
Thank you. So first of all, can you tell us a little bit about why you chose to adopt, please?
Of course. So I've always had kind of a heart for children who are looked after and in care. Even from a really young age, it really upset me that some children had to live that way. And so I decided as a child that I wanted to do something about that when I got older. And so adoption had always been something that I was considering. And when I went on a first date with my husband, found out that he himself had been adopted along with his sibling. And so I said, oh, by the way, I'd like to adopt. And he said, me too. And so our relationship was set and we got married a year later. And so adoption for us really was something that we wanted to actively pursue. It was our first choice way of starting a family because we felt that there were vulnerable children out there who needed a home, and we felt that we would be able to offer a secure family for them.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. So what did you know about the choices of agencies that were available to you before you started your adoption journey?
So I think for us, because adoption had always been something we were considering, we had maybe a bit more of an awareness of it and of the setup than some people might. But I think initially people don't know maybe how to approach it, often because it's what you see advertised when you're sort of driving around your local area. And the first thought is probably to approach local authority. So I think sometimes that's the only option that people think is available to them.
Okay then. So did you know about voluntary adoption agencies before you began your research?
So I found out about voluntary adoption agencies through Home for Good, which is an organisation championing adoption and fostering that I had been connected with since they begun. And so it was through them that I'd heard about voluntary agencies. But it wasn't until I looked at the options out there that I really knew what that meant and the differences between a voluntary agency and a local authority.
Okay, thank you. So what were you looking for in an agency when you were considering which agency you would work with?
So for us, it was really important that it was an agency which felt the same way that we did. So an agency that really cared about these children, that didn't just see them as statistics or as kind of their problem as a local authority that they needed to get rid of so that they didn't have any children waiting or anything like that. For us, the important thing was that the agency saw these children as important, as valued, and as deserving of a home. We wanted an agency that would understand us and our approach and would think that adoption is for everybody who's willing, and wouldn't find it we had concerns that because we hadn't had our own children, we weren't coming to adoption through infertility, that they might question why we were doing this. So we wanted an agency that would embrace and understand that, understand our kind of motivation for doing it. And an agency that would support us through it. I think probably in those initial moments we were focusing more on who would support us through the process, and actually now as an adopter 18 months in, the more important thing is who's going to support you after that process, because 18 months in, that process already feels like a lifetime ago, and it was actually very short 7 months of our life compared to our now lifetime with our adopted children.
Okay then. So what did you learn about your choices then when you were researching?
So we went to 3 different information evenings before we chose an agency. Pact was the first one that we visited. So we found out about Pact through Home for Good because they're a partner agency. And so we came to Pact first, but we wanted to see what our other options were before settling, just to be sure we were really choosing the right thing for us. And so after that, we did visit our local authority. And we visited another voluntary agency as well. So we did kind of weigh up the differences and the pros and cons. And very quickly we realised that a voluntary agency would open up a bigger pool of children to us than our local authority would. And so for us, because the children that we wanted to adopt, it was quite a broad range. So we were approved to adopt siblings between the ages of 3.5 and 9. So we didn't want to necessarily just be sat in a pool of adopters waiting for children in that age range. We wanted to have that option to kind of actively search for children who most needed a home with us. And so being with a voluntary agency allowed us to do that more than a local authority would have done.
Okay, thank you. So, what was your first impression of Pact Charity as a voluntary adoption agency?
So I'll never forget coming out of that Pact information evening and my husband saying, "Oh, when you know, you know." And I think we did know, we did still do that shopping around, because that's even actually Pact didn't say come to us straight away. They even recommended, you said go and do your research and shop around. So, but for us, we knew just through the way that the people presenting spoke about the children waiting. They weren't just statistics. The way that they spoke about the children placed with their adopters, it felt more like a sort of a big family. It felt like they really, really cared. And for us, that was something that was really important. So for us, that was kind of what drew us towards Pact. And actually, as well, just the fact that the social workers were at the information evening. Not all agencies do that, and I think it's really helpful to see how much the social workers care and to meet them and to be able to have those questions answered. Any concerns we had, and we did have concerns over our health and living circumstances and all sorts of things, we were able to ask those questions really quickly and get them answered really quickly, without having to go through too many people. It felt really personal, even just with follow-up phone calls and things kind of from day one. So we just felt really safe and really looked after and well supported.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. So what's been your experience of working with a voluntary adoption agency?
So I think for us, it's been great. I think the really great thing about Pact is that they really do keep hold of their staff. And certainly what I've heard from friends that have adopted through local authorities is that's not always the case. It's often restaffing, kind of shuffling about and things like that. And not for everybody, but for the majority of people we know through Pact, they kept their social worker throughout the whole process, which has just been such an important thing. Our social worker is so important to us. And even now, even though we have the adoption order's gone through and our children are ours, she's still at the end of an email when we need referrals for something or adoption support funding to go through. It just makes everything so much easier. It's just so much more personal. And I think you just feel looked after. You feel like you can pick up the phone, and they don't always know who I am in the office, but sometimes they do. And but there's always that signposting. It's less it's more friendly, it's more approachable than perhaps if you were ringing a council office to be put through within a local authority. So I think for us, it's been a really overwhelmingly positive experience.
That's fantastic. Thank you. So what would you recommend that people consider when they're considering their options with regard to the agency that they work with?
So I think the really important thing to consider, as I've said, which is the thing that probably you're not considering at the time, is who's going to help me when this adoption is done. And I think that's the most important thing, looking at what the support packages look like, because actually living where we do means that we can access our local authority for support as adopters anyway. We can access the local authority where our children came from for 3 years as well for support. But then by adopting through a voluntary agency, we've added this additional layer of support that we otherwise wouldn't have been able to access. And with Pact, that support has come in so many ways to us. And I think it's about, if you have a willingness to ask for support really early on, then that support is there. It's come in forms of speaking with an adopter champion when we were struggling with some things, some behaviours from the children at home, speaking to the school liaison support to help us when we had issues with the children at school, all sorts of different ways, just through applications for adoption support funds, access to therapy, attending family fun days. There's just been so many aftercare things that you'd like to think you're not going to need, but the reality is you probably are going to need to access at least one of these services, if not all of them, at some point over the next 10 years of the life that you're with your child. And the other thing for us was the training. Look at the training that different places are offering. Voluntary agencies often offer more training than a local authority would do. And the training that we received in Pact was exceptional. And the friends that we made through that training are friends that we still have today. We still have an active WhatsApp group over 2 years later, offering support, meeting up. My children's closest friend is a child who was adopted by a single adopter who we met on training, and we went to panel on the same day as. And it's so important for us to have that shared experience with other adopters, but also for our children to have that shared experience with other adopted children as well. Even last night, my daughter was saying, I can't wait for the next adoption fun day, because she's feeling a bit like the odd one out in her class at school. But when she's at the adoption fun day, she knows that every other child in that place is just like her. And so she's really looking forward to having that. So I think they're the things that you really need to be looking for when you're looking at an agency.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. That's been really informative. Thanks, Lesley. So there's lots more information on our website, www.pactcharity.org. And thanks for joining us.